Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hello, this is Pari.
And this is Jenny, and we're here to talk about
Bees Books. The theme that we're talking about today is one that I forgot just literally a minute ago, which is not very successful.
It is
me.
not, Pari, no.
I said it with like all these signposts and lights shining around the theme that is success.
Yes.
I have gone a bit sideways with the theme.
I'd be sad if you didn't.
I did, would indeed. What about you? What are your successful books?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you my first one first.
Okay.
And it's successful in many ways. Okay, so I'm going to just tell you one success and then you can tell me one of your books.
Okay.
But it is The Antiques Hunter's Guide to Murder by C.L. Miller. It has a very pretty cover.
I love the title.
Yes. And the first reason it's a success is because it was the last book in my library pile. So I literally finished my library pile.
I cannot
that
relate.
makes sense.
Yes, I cannot relate. I have never gotten to the bottom of any piles of mine.
It's the first time for a long, long time. So I literally had 3 in my pile. And this was the last one. However, the day after I finished this and was all chuffed with myself, about 4 books came in on request for me. So my pile is now...
That's fine.
Yes.
But it was momentarily.
Yes, a success.
Fantastic, yes.
But I have other reasons it's a success as well.
Okay.
But I'm interested because I can kind of see half your books out the corner of my eye.
Okay, so I have also gone in your direction. Not that I'm calling. This was my pitch right in the beginning. I have gone in a narcissistic direction.
Excellent.
Which is the success is entirely personal. So you have other reasons for success. Mine is just a personal narcissistic reason for success. One of my goals for this year was to read more out of my comfort zone and books that I wouldn't usually pick up. So one of those was The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie.
Interesting.
Which, yes, I see from your face that you love this book. I'll tell everybody the story about why I picked this up in a bit. So this was a very much out of my comfort zone by Muriel. Oh God, this is like Tamsin all over again. Please help, Jenny.
Muriel.
Thank you. Spark, Miss Spark, as I will refer to her
Excellent.
from now on. Not my sort of writer. She wrote the book is set in the early 1920s, 30s, 40s, one of those long ago times. And just it's set in Edinburgh and it's literary fiction, so it's not really my sort of thing, so I wouldn't have picked it up. So, and it's Scottish as well, so I'm glad I got a chance to read a Scottish book as well. She's really popular apparently, which I didn't really know, but now I do. So this was one of my successes that I am reading out of my comfort zone. And the other book is Danny Chum Does Not Do Maths by Maisie Chan. And the reason this is a success is my other goal for this year is to read more books that are in my shelf that I own. And I'm actually on a temporary book buying ban. I feel like I've said this before on the podcast because this keeps happening. This is not a book from my shelf. It's from our shelf, but I have a copy of it at home that I read. And so success all around, I think.
Interesting.
This is a children's book, middle grade. This is about children, I think, teenagers, but not a children's
Well,
book.
I also have a children's book.
Ooh.
I have, which you love. I have Death in the Spotlight by Robin Stevens. And the reason this is I can't say this, is a success is because the library did not have it. So all our copies had disappeared over time.
Yes. Oh, I see it. It has a library sticker on it.
It is in the library now because I bought it. I scoured every charity shop everywhere to see if I could just get a wee second-hand copy. A lot of the charity shops had everyone but this one, so I ended up eventually buying it. And then I'm going to donate it to the library. And as you know, it's in the series of A Murder Most Unladylike series, and it is book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. And I had read the last ones because I never do that. I'm
shaking my head at Jenny quite disappointedly.
No, I know. But I could not get this one and I wanted to read the rest of them.
It's that kind of
I
series.
do not advocate that either. Always read in order of a series. But finally I have. So it's a success in that I finally have got got it and read it.
Yes.
And I very much liked it. I think it's the book that kind of is the turning point for them to become more grown up. So we've spoken about these books before. It is May and Daisy Wells and Hazel Wong.
I had completely forgotten their names
Yes.
too. Yes. Like, who are they?
I think May is the young sister, isn't she?
That's this sequel
Different
series.
Yes, yeah. So Daisy and Hazel are kind of off school for a reason which I'm not entirely sure of, because it's been a while since I've read the book before it. But they go and live with the uncle for a while, who is kind of has a secret job with the government, and so to keep them out of trouble, because they often do find murders, they're sent to work in a theatre. However, there's a murder, because, you know...
Success
Yes.
for the murderer.
And success for them, because they were quite sad that they didn't have something to investigate.
Yeah.
But I felt as if they were kind of... It wasn't in the school and there was no parents there, so they were kind of... I think they're about 15 in this book, and all of a sudden you do feel as if they're kind of more grown up than they were before. They've been put in this situation where there's things happening that they don't ever get in the school, so there's like grown up adult things happening, you know, relationships and kind of and it's the actors in the play. So the play is Romeo and Juliet, and Juliet is killed, and they're trying to find out who done it, basically. And as usual, Hazel is, you know, quite, you know, fine about it, but Daisy wants to do it before the police get involved. So she goes down and they see like the crime scene, and then of course the police come in, and because it is set when it's set, there's no forensics like there is today. So the police come down where the body's found and kind of stand on things, and all the footprints are disappeared and things like that. So Hazel, who, you know, makes all the notes and everything, she goes down and measured all the footprints and things before all that happens. But it definitely had a feeling. The next two books in the series do kind of follow on, although the next one's set in the school. Again, there's more kind of adult themes going on.
And from what I remember, it seemed like they had outgrown the school by that point as well. Like, even in terms of, like, if you read the first books in the series, which started in the boarding school, and the way they spoke about, because they're older as well in this, but the way they interacted with their peers or older students or teachers versus the one that they did. It's a really interesting series in that you see them grow and develop in a very, like, there are other series that I love as well, like mystery series and things which I've like grown up with, and even like things like Agatha Christie and stuff, where they are quite similar because they like they are people, they've become, whereas here they're becoming, and like it's really nice to see that,
basically see them grow up. And it's nice, you know, this follow-on series with Hazel's younger sister, you know, it's nice to see how things develop and how, I think this is set between the wars, and then, you know, the sisters' adventures start as, you know, the Second World War's happening, and it's interesting to see how all that kind of affected children, if you know what I mean. I think when we think of things, we think more of the adults, you know, it's basically children were sent away to the countryside and then it was all the adults. But you know, in these books you're starting to hear, especially through our Uncle Felix, that things are happening abroad. And then, you know, even in the final book in the series, you kind of learn things are happening, and it's nice. It's nice to see them kind of grow up. But I felt this one was definitely where you felt that they were kind of
But they're all also, I think, just really good mysteries.
They are, yes.
As in, you know, you don't feel like the author is talking down to the audience because they're children, and I think that's what good children's writers do.
Absolutely.
Because I know that there are some adult writers who think that writing for children is for like a lower type of writer, or a different sort of, they're not like, you have to grow out of writing
they're not
for children.
real writers.
So like you're a real writer when you write for adults, which I think is very stupid.
Yes.
But in this, like, you can see it just practically that she takes her audience seriously, she gives enough clues and things
Absolutely.
that a sort of keen-eyed reader, either young or old, would be able to pick up things. But also there's enough sort of cleverness and twists and turns that you're taken by surprise.
Exactly, and it's fun as
Mhm.
well. Although there is, like in the later books, some darker side to things, it's still fun.
Yeah.
And reading it as an adult,
Yeah.
you know, you feel that fun that you maybe don't get from an adult
Yes,
time book,
absolutely.
if you see what I mean.
Yeah, because they're funny and they're like, you know, they fight and they're like dramatic.
Yes.
And yeah, which in an adult book you're like, it's all, the drama is all very a different kind
Yes,
of drama, not
yeah.
like fun.
No, and Daisy, who is very much like a kind of Sherlock Holmes type
Yeah.
detective,
Yeah.
you know, she's very much got that kind of attitude that, you know, everybody else is wrong and she's
Yes.
right, and
Yeah.
you know, it's quite hard for her to kind of say Hazel's done something good,
Yeah.
or you know, oh, you've thought of that and that's actually worked.
But
so,
we see like exactly that in the series, that she grows as a person. Like she's
Absolutely.
quite prickly and like difficult in the beginning, and she still is in the end.
yes, she is.
But that relationship, it makes Hazel more confident and more comfortable in like calling out her nonsense.
Absolutely.
And also being comfortable in her own skin. Whereas with Daisy, it sort of like makes her more empathetic to
Yeah.
other people than just herself.
I think you see it in this book as well, because at the beginning Hazel doesn't want to stand up on stage and say her lines. I think she plays Pot Pan, who I don't recall from Romeo and Juliet. I might be making that up, but she's got like literally one line and she's so unconfident, and by the end of the book she is able to go up on stage, deliver her line, and you know, she says herself that she kind of feels now that she's just that wee bit more
Yeah.
confident, and she has a good foil for Daisy.
Yes.
You know, they're good for each other.
Yeah.
You know, Daisy does often call Hazel Watson. You
Yeah.
know, it's that kind of
Uh-huh.
relationship. You know, one's slightly more sensible and you know that kind of a thing.
No, I love the series. I would for sure recommend it, I think, to both young and older
Absolutely.
readers who just like want to read a mystery, and like you can finish this in like a few hours.
But we would say read them in order, and the good thing
Yes.
is you can now,
Yes.
because we now have a copy of it. So yay! So tell me what you thought of The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie.
Right, let me set the stage first for this. Okay, so I'd vaguely heard of this book and the author, Miss Park, whose name I can't pronounce, but not in a very sort of like, it's not as a part of, I think, in my canon, like classical canon, as I think some other books would have been. Like, because when I grew up in India, Scotland was just a country. We didn't know much. Like, we didn't hear much about Scotland or anything. Like, history was British, you know, and mostly English. So even in terms of culture, but also in terms of like writers and things, history, it was mostly like English and British, and how Indian and British history interacted. So didn't know much about this. A couple of weeks ago, I was at the counter and someone returned this book. And one of my co-workers started talking about how she'd grown up watching this. Oh, well, first she asked me whether I'd read this, and I was like, no, this is not my kind of book. And she said, yeah, it's not my kind of book either. But it's apparently like really popular and has given rise to like TV series and movies. And she was like, she'd grown up sort of with her mum watching this, which is how she knew about it. And then another co-worker came in and said that, oh, he'd read it in school. And he quite enjoyed it, except for the end, which was a bit weird, and I was like trying to like sort of thing. But then the co-worker who'd grown up watching it, she started telling me what it was about this teacher who is, and her students, and this teacher is like super inspirational, and the students are like in awe of her, and like they become like the Brodie set. And then you came in and made a face at it. And you were like, please do not read this book. I hate this book. I couldn't get through this book. So color me intrigued.
Absolutely.
I was super intrigued. And I love these teacher kind of books. Like, I love books set in schools, and I love especially like a girls' school, like that kind of is what I went in expecting, like a school story with like an inspirational teacher, and think this was not that kind of book. But Jenny, I have to admit, I really enjoyed this book.
Did you?
It was so weird because like it's not at all about an inspirational teacher. I mean, it is. It is about Miss Jean Brodie, but she is a very strange woman.
Yes.
A very strange teacher, and I don't think that it's presented as she is a good teacher, because you're seeing this from the perspective of like many different perspectives really, but mostly from one of the students' perspective, and it travels back and forth in time as well, like her past and then the student's future, and including one of the students who dies and things. And I didn't expect how funny this book is. This book was so funny in that, not like a haha, like oh my god I'm crying laughing, but a really wry sense of humor, as in the writer was like, in one of the things in the introduction, like Alan Taylor writes an introduction, who's also a writer, I think, maybe a Scottish writer, don't know, but he introduces and he says that you know, she makes this passing reference to like through one of the characters, that oh, you know, so Miss Jean Brodie on Sunday, she goes to all the different churches in Edinburgh because she likes to see what everyone is doing and like see how like they interact with God, I guess, and things, except the Roman Catholics because they're full of superstition and whatever. And this is when the author had just converted to Roman Catholicism, so it wasn't supposed to be taken seriously. And I feel like this whole book is full of like that, like there's almost like an underlayer going on. So that is the story, what Miss Jean Brodie says and what these students, these girls are saying and what's happening around it. But it's also like they really, I don't necessarily think there are any nice characters in it because they're all really difficult and different and weird and sometimes silly and sometimes stupid, including Miss Jean Brodie, and they're so dramatic about things. And it's just, I like, for something that was so out of my comfort zone, and it's really thin as well. It's only like 100
and you don't have a particularly nice covered copy.
No,
it's quite plain.
I think they're relying on Miss Sparks's name and the sort of the popularity of this, which I would never have had this whole conversation with you and Tracy and Danny not happen. I would never have picked it up, and I'm actually really glad that I did, because I didn't expect to enjoy it, and I expected to like enjoy it in a different way, but it wasn't that kind of book. And you know, we've talked about this before, when you go into a book expecting it to be something and it's not, and it takes away from it a little bit. In this case, I'm really happy. I knew very little about this because I went in like sort of straight, and I was like this is such a weird book, and I honestly really enjoyed it, and so much so that I would want to read her other works.
Oh,
I know.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is bizarre. When I read it, I didn't even get halfway through it. It just was not for me. I felt as if it was, maybe I misunderstood it, and maybe I would go and watch the film or you know, to get a different idea. But it was just not, and I like, you know, I would read Jane Austen, I would read things like that. It passed me by. Yeah. Perhaps the references that you kind of got, I didn't get.
I mean, it wasn't even the references, and you're right, like I think I would have gone thinking of it in the vibe of, because it's an old-timey book, not as old-timey as Jane Austen, but I would have thought of it as a classic like that, like Anne of Green Gables or that. It's not, it's very modern.
Yes.
Even though it's set in like the 1930s and things, the things that she talks about, the things that these girls are interested in and stuff, it could have been picked up from now. Yeah. I really liked that it takes girls so seriously. Like it's about teenage girls, and also this like middle-aged woman. And it doesn't present them in stereotypical ways, which I think, especially for that time when she was writing, must have been like absolutely. It must have been so radical in it. Like obviously now you're used to like all these things, but for the time that it's set in, and you know, all these things that the girls are interested in, that you think that girls maybe shouldn't be interested in or aren't interested in, and like this woman as well, like she's also like a really deeply complex and like complicated character, this Miss Jean Brodie. But the way that it's presented, I thought was like completely like, again, like I did not expect this to be a funny book, and I was like, what is going on? Like at one point I think I laughed out loud at the absurdity of it, because it's absurd humor. It's not like it's not. I don't think it's trying to present itself as a funny book, but the writer and her personality, I think, is like really wry and like things that you wouldn't catch and stuff. So it's just it's a super weird book. Maybe you have to be in the right frame of mind.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I wasn't in the right place.
And I don't think it would be. I don't think it would work for everybody, because if you're going into a book expecting the kind of book that I was expecting, and then you get this, it's quite like sort of quite startling, because it is like there's a lot about sex there, a lot about relationships, a lot about friendships, and things in a way that's not easy. It's much more about the characters than the plot. There isn't really a plot.
No, it just ambles along.
Yeah, it's just so. Again, this is stuff like I love plots. I love a good plot-driven thing. But the characters were so weird and messy and fun and funny that I thought it was just the brain that came up with this. I was like, she is like one weird lady in a good way.
Oh, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did.
Hearing you talk about it has made me think maybe I should give it another try.
I don't know that. Because I think if you didn't, maybe you give it a shot.
Yeah.
I think because I went in so blind and it just like caught me by surprise that it was successful in like converting me to Miss Spark.
The thing is, I felt that they basically said the phrase "the prime of Miss Jean Brodie" a lot.
They did.
And I think I eventually was like, can't be bothered now.
So I think the sort of it would be a mistake to approach this book seriously.
Right, okay.
I think like if you do approach it seriously, like you would read like a important book, like with an capital B. I think it's not that kind of book, or if it is, that's not how that wasn't my relationship with it. I approached it as a like seriously unserious book.
Right, okay.
In that, like, it was talking about these interesting like people and stuff, but it was doing it with very like sort of light touch. It wasn't taking itself too seriously, is what I thought of it, which is why I was on board with it. I think if it would have, but it was pretending to take itself too serious. Like it was like, oh, because she is always talking about it. I am in my prime, and you know, I am dedicating my life to you girls and like to shaping and molding you. But she's actually like quite nasty, and she's like jealous and spiteful, and like also like really funny in like a very like scary way. Sometimes she's very she loves the Italian fascists. She does at that time, because it's set just before or during the war. So thinks Mussolini is doing like a great grand old thing for Italy, thinks Hitler is a good old chap and things. So, you know, like even just with that, you can't take her seriously.
No, exactly.
And so yeah, it's just throughout the book, I think I didn't take it seriously, which is why I think I enjoyed it.
Okay.
So maybe that was the key.
Yes, I need to switch off.
Yeah, so like, these people are all ridiculous. So yeah, because one of them becomes a nun, as you do.
All right,
Yeah.
Again, I might give the on screen. I think Maggie Smith was in a version of it, and see if that incites me to read it.
Yeah, because I would actually be very curious to see how they've approached it. Like, did they do it seriously, or did they take it with like a grain of salt, or did they do it like wryly? I would for sure want to watch it as well.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So tell me about your antique murders.
Okay, so as I said, this is the last book of my library book pile for 10 minutes. But I also wanted to point out that the author is the daughter of Miller's Antiques Millers. So you're looking slightly puzzled. So back in the day, every library reference section had Miller's Antiques. And basically it's a book of all the kind of antiques, and like roughly what price they would be, in what condition, all that kind of stuff. It was like the book that every reference library had.
Really?
And you would get lots of people coming in, tidying out the loft, and they would kind of look through it and go, oh, I've got that, but the leg's broken off, so it's not going to be worth any money. Or, oh, I've got that, and it doesn't matter if it's got a chip in it, because...
all right.
And I think the Judith Miller was quite often seen on Antiques Roadshow as well.
Ah, yes.
So the person that wrote the Antiques Hunter's Guide to Murder is the daughter of the Millers. So there's another success story there, in that her parents were, you know, big in the antiques business.
Yeah.
And then she's went on to write a book taking all the knowledge that she grew up with and putting it in this book. So that's another kind of success
I
story.
love it.
Miller's Antiques, you don't see them as often now. Everything's kind of online, and it's a shame because it's a wonderful book to sit and see.
Absolutely. I never knew such a thing existed,
Yes.
and I'm obsessed with it immediately.
Yes. But it's fascinating to kind of look through and go, oh, if I seen that at a car boot sale, I would walk past it for 50p. Oh, look, it's worth £2,000.
Yeah.
You know, it's that kind of a book. And I to say there's quite a lot in it that kind of says, oh, you absolutely need the box for this, otherwise it's not worth anything, or it doesn't matter, you know, somebody will still look at it.
Wow.
Obviously, with all the antique stuff that's about nowadays, people are more savvy about everything anyway. You know, you can sit down in an afternoon and watch 3 different antique shows in a row and kind of get an idea of what things are worth. But when I read the Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder, I didn't put the two together, and it wasn't till I kind of read at the end, you know, the acknowledgements, I kind of went, oh right, okay. And you can tell that she's had a background in antiques. So the main character, who I've immediately forgotten, called Freya, is married. She's split up with her husband. He wants to sell the house and move on, and she doesn't want to. So the agreement is that when their daughter reaches a certain age, I can't remember if it's 16 or 18, then the house will get sold. But until that time, the daughter can stay in the childhood home and be fine. And it's now coming up to that time. The daughter's about to go to university, and so it must be 18. And basically he wants to sell the house. He doesn't sound a very nice man. He wasn't very nice to her, but she's been married to him for 20 odd years. So she's at a kind of crossroads, and you learn that before all that she was an antique hunter, which was in my head a mixture between Indiana Jones and Lara Croft.
I just did like a whip
Yes,
thing,
I've
which
seen that.
nobody would have been able to
I know
see,
what you
but
meant,
yes,
that's
thank
fine.
you.
So she used to be this antique hunter. She worked closely with her aunt's friend, and he used to take her to like all sort of places. And basically what they did was they kind of took artefacts that were maybe in museums or in people's personal collection and put them back where they belonged. So it is a big thing, you know, about and I can't remember the word I'm looking for, but putting things back where they should be, you know, back in the time they took a lot from like Egypt and kind of so that
repatriation.
Yes, thank you very much. It was on the tip of my tongue. I was going to say repair, and that's not the
I
right
was going to
word.
say reparation, and like that's not
No.
this. I mean, kind of, but no.
So she was involved in that. She was also involved in insurance jobs. So if people went in and stole high-end art and things from museums, she was part of the team that would kind of help to recover all that. You kind of know that in the background. So this is like 20 years later, and there has been a thing 20 years ago between her and the man who I've obviously forgotten the name of as well. We'll call him Bob. And something happened, which you learn about throughout the book, but you don't know what happened. And basically she went away, stopped being an antique hunter, got married, had a miserable marriage, but she did get a lovely daughter out of it. He is killed. He is murdered in his shop, and basically wants her and her aunt to find out what happened and finish the job that he was on, and which leads to her finding out what happened in Cairo. The big fallout happened in Cairo, and so she kind of, it does have a good ending that's all kind of tied off, but throughout that obviously there's the murder mystery of him, you know, being murdered, and the kind of clues that are left behind as to why. So right, like near the beginning, a letter is handed in to a coffee shop owner, and with the instructions that if her and aunt come into that coffee shop, the letter is to be handed over, because he knows that although they had this big falling out, she still keeps in contact with her aunt, and actually she goes and lives with her for a while the house stuff is happening, and they're like, well, why didn't this letter get left with the solicitors? Because, you know, and it's like, well, why wasn't it left with the solicitors? And basically it's a wee letter that kind of says something, but there's a code in it which tells them something, which leads on to something else. And it was really, I really enjoyed it. I didn't expect to. after the first few pages, and then I did, and then was like, and then I was like, oh yes, no, that's fine.
Okay, so it was a roller coaster.
Yes, exactly. She does waffle, not waffle, that's quite a strong word. She kind of meanders occasionally.
That's just a nicer word.
Yes, exactly. But we'll use it. She meanders occasionally. Sometimes you kind of want to kind of rein her back slightly, but actually the meanderings have a point. But you don't know that at the time. You kind of go, oh, you've just wandered away there. Maybe you've seen a nice flower over there. You've gone. But it's well done, and I hope that she writes more, because at the end of it, things are sorted out, and then there's perspective for more things to happen. She gets her mojo back, and she kind of, quite
so
likes.
She is the one then who's both the detective and like looking for antiques.
Yes,
I love it. I'm sold. I love the idea of this.
And I'm disappointed I can't remember what, because Aunt Carol is her aunt. Arthur Crockleford.
Oh,
yes,
that is quite a name to forget.
Yes, but he owns this shop in this wee kind of sleepy village.
Love it.
And it had everything that you wanted in it. But as I say, you can definitely tell that she's had a background in this, that she's kind of grown up with antiques and kind of knows.
Is this her first book?
I think so.
I think that like what your waffling bit thing, I think if she sort of writes more, she'd be able to tell as well.
Exactly.
What works and what doesn't.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I do hope that she learns and goes on to write more, because I want to see what Freya does next. I want to see her, because she's now like in her 40s, so she's not like a young Lara Croft anymore.
Well, we still need middle-aged, old, elderly adventurers.
And that's what I liked. I liked the aunt as well, because the character's parents, I think, passed away when she was young, so she did spend a lot of time with her aunt, and she's quite a flamboyant character. She's quite, she walks into a room and just takes over. I think she was an actress, and she just kind of has that vibe about her. There's also like an old house that they go to, and it's like, oh, who's the good and who's bad? There's a gardener, and there's a caretaker, a maid, and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, oh, what's happening here? It had lots in it, and it all worked. A wee bit of a kind of love interest as well, but not made much of, because obviously
for now.
Yes, exactly. I want to see where that goes.
It sounds like a really rich world, in that like if she's taken so much trouble establishing it, it would be nice to explore it further.
Absolutely. I hope she does. She does. But no, so yes, lots of reasons it's a success.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that I liked Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths as well, because it's about this intergenerational thing. So on the tin, it's about this boy, I think he's 11 years old, he might be a little younger, lives in Birmingham, which is where the author is from. I thought the author she does now live in Glasgow, so throughout like the first couple of chapters, I was imagining the whole thing taking place in Glasgow, and I was all set to talk about, I read one book set in Edinburgh and one book set in Glasgow, and then she said something of Lovedale, Birmingham, and I was like, I don't recognize these places. But anyway, it doesn't matter, because it's mostly about the relationships in this book. And this is, again, it's not the kind of book that I would necessarily be drawn to in a middle grade category, because it's realistic fiction and it's about families and friendships, which is all nice and all, but I like some action and like some Lara Croftness. And it's about Danny, who is very bad at maths, and he's Chinese, so British Chinese, and there's the stereotype that all Chinese people are supposed to be like really good at maths and things, so I think she was playing off of that. And also, he lives with, and his parents run a takeaway, a Chinese takeaway, so they live upstairs, and now the father's mum's coming over from China to live with them. But it's only a very tiny flat, she's moved into his room, so they are now
Oh.
roommates. He is very unhappy about this situation because he was hoping for a better surprise. They don't tell him until like she's literally there, and she doesn't speak English. But she's really excited about getting to know her son, her grandson, and like sort of reconnecting with her son and his wife. So it's a very on like the surface, it's very much about that, like family connections and relationships and building, and like obviously at the end, they're gonna be like together. But there's like a lot random things thrown in there, like a bingo championship, and and she's obsessed with fruits. Like she just carries like a bunch of fruits everywhere she goes and eats it like very dramatically. And she's also like she's also ready to like try everything. Like she like dominates at it's sort of like mini golf, I want to say, some sort of game like mini golf, that she just goes into lawn bowling. Maybe that's it. Which is not at all like mini golf, I think. But it's one of those games. Yes, some sports that, as you can see, I'm not at all well versed. It involves a ball and throwing.
Pari does not do sports.
Exactly. I don't know if there is any Indian stereotypes about sports. I do not fit in it either way. But so she at one point he takes her to the club because he's been tasked with taking her around town to do activities and things, and he takes her to this lawn bowling / mini golf tournament, and she just knocks it out of the park with a grapefruit because she keeps carrying all these fruits with her, wins, and sort of angers the locals because they're like, what is this? We have a championship going on. This old woman can't just come in. Not old, they're all old. This woman can't just come in and do this. And it's a little bit about, there's a Scottish character in it as well. This very nice, and they become friends even though they don't speak the language. So it's all these really little, really lovely things. She also writes a lot about his frustrations, about school stuff, but also family stuff, is not taken seriously as a child. So it's not a book that I think I would have picked up usually. I had it because someone had given it to me. Because she's in Glasgow, she was at a literature festival. So I had the book that I was sort of part of organizing. And it's really lovely. I just ended up enjoying it so much. It's a very sort of slow, gentle story. And I also loved how much I learned in not a teachy way about the British Chinese cultural experience, because I was telling you this I think a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about her, I think Miss Jean Brodie. I grew up in India and I grew up reading a lot of British and American children's books, so for me it was always foreign and it was always exotic. So all these cultures I had to sort of, clue in together, because things that I don't really know, but now I know through the books that I'm reading. I haven't read a lot of Chinese or British Chinese literature, and this was such an accessible way as well, not just for kids, but for adults. There's this whole movement in children's books. It started in the US, but it's going all over, about we need diverse books, because there are so many books that where only the dominant culture, and in India it's the same as well, but the dominant culture would be different, is sort of dominates in all the stories, which is fine. But also it's nice for people from different cultures that are not dominant to see themselves, but also for people from other cultures to read those, to read about it, and in a way that's not exoticizing or not stereotyping. It's just a regular book,
just normal, regular.
It would be a white Scottish child having his grandma come in, who lives far away, and come in and sort of that would be difficult as well if they're rooming together. And he's I want my own room. And it's just, so it's sort of a really nice mix of familiar and unfamiliar in a very fun way. It's not a teachy way. So the point of it is not that he's a British Chinese child where that you should be reading, or it's just a fun story, but it's set in a cultural milieu. I was impressed by my own. I pronounced it wrong.
Success, yeah.
The second time around. It was just so nice. She has another book, I think, something about Keep On Dancing, Lizzie Chu, something like that. But so she's writing, because she writes in the acknowledgements, like you, I love reading the acknowledgements. And she wrote that, when she was growing up, she grew up, she's British Chinese as well, grew up in Birmingham, didn't see herself represented in the books and the media that she was consuming. So she wanted to write stories that her kids could recognize, other kids could recognize, and adults as well, I guess. So it's really nice. It's sort of, if you want to read about another culture, that's perfect. If you don't, you're not bothered either way. It's still nice. It's still a great book, I think. So
and also it could be set in Scotland as
It could.
opposed to Birmingham if you wanted to.
It could, yes, it could, which I was convinced it was set in Glasgow. I think the second book might be, or I might be making it up,
Excellent.
but she is in Glasgow. So in my head, everything she writes is in Glasgow. But both of these books, like, really successful. This also in a similar way, like this sort of olden Scottish things, because it's very much Edinburgh based, and she writes about like things, but it's a different kind of Edinburgh. And one of the things she writes about in this as well, like one of the characters is talking to somebody and observes this, that actually his Edinburgh, the thing he's telling me about, is so different from my Edinburgh, which I thought was so nice, which is, it's the same in Glasgow or fake Glasgow, aka Birmingham, that, you know, you have such different experiences of a place.
Absolutely.
And reading books like this is such a nice way to learn about an experience that's not yours, but see the world through another pair of eyes, I guess. So, yes, success.
Yes, I think it's success all round.
All
Pari, I
round.
think we've done quite well actually
Yes.
today.
So, what do you think about the next theme? Is it going to be successful for us?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
So she changed her mind a few times.
Oh, she does do that,
Yes, she
yes.
does. But she has settled on,
Ah.
finally, B, thank you very much, visitor. Just single word, visitor.
Oh, this could have fit in that. The
Yes.
grandma was the visitor in Danny Chung Does Not Do Maths. In this prime of Miss Jean Brodie, you'd have to be more creative, I think.
Well,
with
you were the
visiting
visitor.
angle.
You were the visitor to a different...
You are 100% right, yes.
B has taught us to be...
She has, yeah,
yes.
yeah. And when you first said visitor, immediately aliens is where my
Oh.
brain went. You,
Okay.
it's either murder or it's aliens.
Fair enough.
Yeah, my bad
Fair enough.
collection of mine. But yes, I can't wait. I'm really intrigued. Colour me intrigued for the second time today. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about.
Excellent.
I'm really excited to find out. Good luck to us all.
Yes, we've got a couple of weeks to work out. We'll be
Yes,
fine.
we do.
We'll be fine.
But in the meanwhile, thank you so much for listening.
Bye.